Well, the House passed a $460 billion spending bill yesterday to avert a partial government shutdown. Now, the version the House passed is full of spending earmarks, even as our national debt increases by $1 trillion every 100 days. It's as if nobody even cares. The legislation now heads to the Senate, where it is stalled temporarily. A vote could take place following the president's State of the Union address this evening. Joining me now for an update on what is taking place in the Senate is Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. He serves on the Senate Budget Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Johnson, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Well, Tony, thanks for having me back.
Good to see you. So let's start with the spending bill. What's the latest on the spending bill?
Thousands of earmarks. It'll pass, I think, sometime either late tonight or sometime tomorrow. I don't think anybody really wants a government shutdown. And, the Uniparty is well at work here in Washington, D.C. It's unfortunate we're close to $35 trillion in debt, and we continue to pass things like earmarks. You saw that John Fetterman had to withdraw his support for one basically sex club. And the problem is you don't have enough time to go through all these. We finally see the text of the bill. I think there's something like 19,000 earmarks requested of the appropriation committees. And then, the appropriators, they winnow them down to, I think there's 6,000 earmarks in this, billions of dollars worth. But you really don't have time to go through these things in detail, really analyze, well, what exactly is this? I mean, they're obviously not going to call it a sex club for putting on sex shows for children. You have to dig into that. You need a lot of outside groups looking at this and ferreting this out. But again, this passed in the House already. It'll pass in the Senate within 24 hours. So, we'll forget about this, move on, and there will be more destruction to the American homeland based on Democrat governance.
Well, I want to drill down on this just a moment, because that is a good example. I mean, it's one of 6,000, but it is a place where people can actually make a difference. And I want to kind of get the backstory here. There's $1 million in federal funding for an LGBTQ organization that had, was used, as you said, for sex parties. Also had the drag queen events for children. So was it the outside agitation over this that caused Fetterman to withdraw this?
Yeah, I mean, somebody noticed this. I'm not exactly sure who noticed it. They knew what it was about. They publicized that fact. Trust me, the earmark request itself didn't have that detail. So somebody understood what this was about, blew the whistle on it, highlighted it. But again, when you're talking about 6,000 of these earmarks,
right.
Some they'll call this congressionally directed spending. And I understand. I'm somewhat sympathetic with the fact that, Congress, the elected representatives of the people, ought to have some say in exactly where money goes. Don't leave that all up to the executive branch. The problem is these earmarks have been used historically as the gateway drug to the other massive deficit spending. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. You vote for my bill, and we'll make sure we'll tuck, a couple $1 million into the package for your, coveted earmark. It's an awful way of doing business.
Well, it is. That's why we have $35 trillion in debt. I also find it very interesting that it was the outside agitation on this. It wasn't Republicans, raising concern over this internally. It was the outside agitation, again, that caused members to withdraw this. The two senators from Pennsylvania, one of whom is in cycle this year. So I think the politics, hearing in the city becomes a lot better during election year. So let's talk.
Tony, again, I'm not sure who uncovered this, but there's no doubt about it. If we have an inquisitive media that is holding both sides accountable, when you have these outside groups that when something's released, they dig into that right away and they use the power of the internet and crowdsourcing to cover this kind of things. But you need time to do that. You need to open up the process. And that's what basically this dysfunctional Congress, they don't give us that time.
Right. So there is some good news here for people who say, what can I do to make a difference? Well, one is you can agitate. I mean, when you find this stuff, say something about it. This is why we cover these things on the program. That's why we encourage people to contact their members of Congress, because people can make a difference. I mean, again, this is a great example of that. But to your point, we've got to reform this process if we're ever going to get our debt under control.
Absolutely. And again, the way the process should work is these appropriation bills with the earmarks should have gone through committee, should have been available on public websites so people could start delving into all the detail of this, as opposed to the basic appropriation bills passed and then the earmarks added toward the tail end. Now, again, this is better than what they've done in the past. I mean, in the past, I think some of these things were added literally in the dead of night, minutes, if not hours before things are voted on. So a little bit more discipline, but not enough.
So, Senator, let's talk about tonight. President Biden will be giving his final State of the Union address of his term. What do you anticipate?
Well, I think he's going to try and put lipstick on this pig. I don't think there's enough lipstick in the world to cover up the disaster that is Democrat governance. But he's going to try and paint a rosy scenario here. But the problem is, for example, his massive deficit spending sparked 40-year high inflation. And even though that inflation rate is down, a dollar you held at the start of the Biden administration is only worth 85 cents. That's not going away. That's why people are feeling the pain. And of course, his open border has been a catastrophe. And even the mainstream media can't cover this up anymore because mayors like Mayor Adams, Mayor Johnson, Chicago, they realize their sanctuary cities aren't working too well. It's destroying their cities. They're saying something about it. So now the mainstream media is forced to cover this. Plus, you have instances, tragedies like Laken Riley,
right.
A young woman murdered by an illegal immigrant, a 2-year-old shot in the crossfire between illegal immigrants, a 14-year-old raped by an illegal immigrant. That can't be covered up, and more Americans are aware of this, and they're demanding action. And unfortunately, President Biden, even though he has the authority to close the border, wants an open border, and is just lying to the American public that, well, I need congressional action. No, you don't. You use that authority to open it up. You can close the border with that same authority. You just don't want to do it.
So tonight, based upon the comments from the White House and some of the president's surrogates, it sounds as if he's going to pivot off of the immigration issue because, as you said, he can't prevail in that. He's just going to blame the Republicans, and it looks like he's going to move to the issue of abortion. He wants to talk about quote unquote reproductive rights. Now, this worked in the midterm election where Republicans were hesitant to talk about the issue. Do they see weakness among Republicans when it comes to the sanctity of human life?
Well, unfortunately, the media, as always, is on the left's side here. And so they don't point out the fact that the extreme position on abortion is the one held by Democrats who want to allow abortions up to the moment of birth, and then, in some cases, not even provide life-saving care to a child after that child has been born. I mean, that is the extreme position. And so they take the instance in Alabama, even though Alabama legislature has now passed a law to protect in vitro fertilization. I mean, in my case, I have 2 grandchildren through in vitro fertilization. So we want to protect that. We want to protect life created through IVF. But Democrats will lie and they'll distort people's position, and the mainstream media will back that up to hide the fact that the extreme position on abortion is the one held by Democrats, abortion up to the moment of life.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I think Republicans have to have the confidence to say just what you said, because that is the truth. The extreme position is abortion up until the moment of birth at taxpayer expense, which is what the Democrats are advocating for and is in their party platform. Senator, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'll be watching the State of the Union. Make sure you stay awake during that speech.
Stay well and God bless.